Hello there, Star Wars fans, and welcome to part 2 of this fan fiction. Don't worry, if you didn't watch part 1, you don't have to leave, because I'm just going to combine both parts into this. So if you're wondering, why is this one so long? Well, it's because I combined them. So if you already watched part 1, you can skip ahead a bit here. I will put the timestamp, just look on the screen right now, and you'll see the timestamp. Perfect. If I forgot to do that, sorry. Anyways, getting into part 2, leaving right off where we left on part 1. Basically, Dooku captured Padme and Satine. So, Anakin and Obi-Wan, trying to also fend off the dark side, trying hard to still be good people, not fully embrace the dark side, go after them. So that's where we're leaving off today. Hope you enjoy. See you in the next video, and enjoy this one. Alright, let's get into it. Several years had passed since the events on Naboo that led Obi-Wan Kenobi to train Anakin Skywalker. Obi-Wan was still young, but he was up to the task of training Anakin. He would not let Qui-Gon down. He would train the boy. He would not let him fall down a path of darkness. Anakin was powerful. More powerful than any of the Jedi around his age. Even more powerful than some Jedi Knights. No one wants to admit it, but he's right up there with some of the Masters as well. It was a regular day in the Jedi Temple for most, but not for Anakin. He sat in his quarters, contemplating this whole life as a Jedi. He didn't enjoy the rigid lifestyle, but he thought it was something that he just had to do for all these years. But why? It was never actually his choice. Sure, he dreamed of the Jedi on Tatooine, but he didn't know what it truly meant to be a Jedi. And one day, Qui-Gon Jinn showed up, felt his power, and decided he would be a Jedi. What was he gonna say? No? Of course not. But now, the more Anakin thought about it, the more he knew that this life was just not for him. This was something he'd thought about for quite a while, and now he knew it to be true. He had to leave the Jedi Order. Obi-Wan found Anakin just outside of the temple later on. He was staring into the forever city of Coruscant. He could sense Anakin was troubled, but he didn't expect to hear this. "Master, I need to leave the Jedi Order. I wish to explore the galaxy myself. I wish to help people without waiting on the Senate. I wish to just be more," Anakin said. Obi-Wan stared at him, bewildered, searching for words. He could only reply with, Anakin, if that is what you wish, I cannot stop you. I only ask that you allow me one full rotation to think about this. Can you give me that time?" "Yes, Master," replied Anakin. And so now Obi-Wan thought about things. This discussion with Anakin was unexpected, but the more Obi-Wan thought, the more sense it made. The boy was different than everyone else, more powerful, also more compassionate, more with his emotions. Obi-Wan knew all this, and he also knew the real reason that he was deep in thought. If Anakin left the Jedi Order, Obi-Wan would have to go with him, for Qui-Gon. The door to Yoda's meditation chambers opened, and Obi-Wan sat down beside Yoda, eyes closed, deep in thought. "Conflicted you are, Master Kenobi. I sense trouble with young Skywalker, "Yes, Master," Obi-Wan replied. "He wishes to leave the Jedi Order, and in order to fulfill Qui-Gon's dying wish, I must go with him." Yoda opened his eyes and looked at Obi-Wan, his expression largely unchanged. "If leave the Order Skywalker wants, then stop him we cannot. And to go with him, the correct decision it is." "I know," said Obi-Wan. "We all feel the darkness that looms in the shadows. I cannot let it find Anakin. It would be catastrophic." Yoda made an agreeing sound with Obi-Wan. The two departed the room, and Obi-Wan went to find Anakin once again. He found Anakin this time in his quarters and told him everything. Obi-Wan said that Anakin could leave the Order now, but he was gonna go with him, for Qui-Gon. As Obi-Wan explained this, he actually felt a spark of happiness inside of Anakin. The two were growing really close, and Anakin did not want to leave Obi-Wan. They were closer than Anakin ever thought they would be. And once it was all laid out, Anakin asked a question that Obi-Wan hadn't really expected. "Obi-Wan, when we leave, must we give up our lightsabers?" Obi-Wan scratched his beard and said, "Yes, they are the weapon of a Jedi. We will no longer be Jedi." "But the red man on Tatooine and Naboo, he wasn't Jedi, and he had a lightsaber," Anakin said. If we leave right now, just go away. We get to keep the lightsabers. Obi-Wan knew keeping the sabers was important. It was not the Jedi way to break rules like this, but he was about to not be a Jedi any longer. So why not? Anakin and Obi-Wan left right then and there, walking through the temple, making their way down the halls, out the doors and down the stairs to a ship big enough for them to both sit comfortably. They took off, with Obi-Wan having a destination in mind. Yoda watched through his window as the two of them left. He was not surprised by their actions. Training Anakin to be a Jedi would never be easy, but perhaps the two of them could make a difference elsewhere in the galaxy. After all, if the prophecy was true, Anakin was the only one that could destroy the impending darkness on the galaxy. Obi-Wan and Anakin emerged from hyperspace, the planet of Mandalore directly in front of them. Obi-Wan said, "I have an old friend here on Mandalore. She will help us settle down and figure things out." Anakin smiled at him, clearly sensing Obi-Wan's excitement. "If you say so," he replied, and the two of them made their way to the city, and eventually to the building with Duchess Satine sitting atop her throne. There was some trouble with Mandalore security, but after finding out these were no longer Jedi, things went smoother and they were able to make their way. Obi-Wan walked through the door to face the Duchess. He couldn't help but crack a smile as a look of surprise formed on her face. "Obi-Wan, what are you doing here?" He replied, "Duchess, this is my friend, Anakin Skywalker. He was formerly my Jedi apprentice, until the both of us decided we should leave the Jedi Order. Now we are here, in need of your hospitality, as we settle into our new lives." She replied after a moment, "Of course, Obi-Wan. You helped me years ago, and now I will return the favor." And so Anakin and Obi-Wan settled into Mandalore as guests. In return for their favor, they would aid with any protection if necessary. And now, fast forward, the next handful of years would play out like this. Anakin and Obi-Wan resided on Mandalore. They trained together, not as Jedi, but rather as Force wielders. Anakin embraced his power, quickly becoming more powerful than Obi-Wan. But Anakin had grown extremely fond of Obi-Wan. They were the closest things each other had to family. They were like brothers, father-son, any relationship. They were beyond close. Mandalore didn't love having two non-Mandalorian protectors around, but opinions began to sway the more these former Jedi proved themselves. Violent attacks against Satine or the people would occur, and almost every time the former Jedi were able to stop the attacks. Since the day the two landed on Mandalore, the spark between Obi-Wan and Satine had grown. The two were quite fond of each other, but at first they didn't have much time to rekindle the old flame. But as more time went on, as more time passed, the two were able to really get to know each other again, and as years passed, they became very close. Eventually, the two walked alongside the city walls discussing everything. "Your friend, Anakin, has become quite popular when he is around. He has a way of bringing people together, and I haven't seen something like him in a long time." Obi-Wan replied with a chuckle, "I have trained him, after all. But you're right, he was never meant to be a Jedi. He longs for connection. His emotions are strong, and they make him strong. His power is growing past anything I thought possible. I'm just happy that he's happy. I'm happy we're here." The two kept walking, and Satine said, "I agree that he was not meant to be a Jedi." And Obi-Wan, "Neither were you." She grabbed his hand to face him now. "I'm glad we're able to spend time together. I have always loved you." Life was good on Mandalore, for Anakin, for Obi-Wan, for Satine. All was going well. Meanwhile, Anakin was on a Mandalorian landing pad, preparing to help the Mandalorians welcome a group from the Republic. Senator Padme Amidala was leading a group to discuss Mandalore and their relationship with the Republic. And as the Republic ship landed, Anakin watched her walk down the ramp. She was beautiful as Anakin remembered. He'd thought about Padme all the time, and now the Force had brought them together. Anakin began walking towards her when he sensed something. Suddenly, 10 Mandalorians on jetpacks emerged from behind the ship. They were targeting Padme. This was an assassination attempt. Anakin jumped to action. Igniting his lightsaber, he grabbed one of the troopers with the Force, slamming him into the landing pad. The other 9 shot at Padme, 2 other senators, and 5 members of the Coruscant Guard. Anakin helped block the bolts of 3 of them, shooting 3 Mandalorians down. He hid Padme under the ship, which had its ramp closed now. Anakin jumped to the top and continued blocking blaster fire. In a quick motion, he jumped into the air, landing on the shoulders of one of them and cutting his jetpack before doing the same to 2 more. Anakin landed back on the ship, threw his saber at one, grabbed the other with the Force, crushing his throat. They were now gone, but there should have been one more. Anakin looked down to Padme, seeing a Mandalorian aim at her. As he pulled the trigger, Anakin was barely able to shift the blaster away, and he saw it scatter across the ground as a blaster bolt was fired. Anakin jumped down, cut his jetpack, and slammed the Mandalorian to the ground, knocking him out. He turned back to Padme now, but her eyes were closed, and a clear blaster bolt had hit her in the side. Anakin was too late. The final Mandalorian didn't miss, despite Anakin pushing the blaster away. But perhaps it wasn't fatal. Perhaps Anakin had altered the blast just enough to save her. The Mandalorian that Anakin knocked out was taken into custody, as Anakin carried Padme to the nearest hospital. As time passed, Anakin waited as Obi-Wan and Satine eventually emerged. "We heard what happened at the landing platform. We will get to the bottom of this assassination attempt," Satine said. But Obi-Wan felt Anakin in the Force. He was angry, unbalanced, hatred inside of him. "Anakin, it's not your fault," Obi-Wan said. He couldn't quite make out why Anakin was surrounded by this darkness, but something was off. "I'm going to find whoever did this to her," Anakin replied. "I will keep her safe. I hadn't seen her in years, and then I can't even protect her." Obi-Wan understood, the same way he understood his own feelings for Satine. Anakin is in love. He also understood how Anakin felt right now. Obi-Wan felt the same way years ago, when protecting Satine with his own master, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan knew how he would feel if something happened to her today. Leaving the Jedi Order opened both Anakin and Obi-Wan to dark side corruption, whether they knew it, wanted it, or not. Staying balanced, staying in some gray area, was truly very difficult. Obi-Wan was beginning to see that, but neither of them really tried to stop it. This new life alongside the woman he loved was good, and he wanted Anakin to get the same thing. Eventually, though, the medical doors opened and Padme walked out. Obi-Wan felt the darkness fade from Anakin as he approached her. "Annie," she said, "it really is you. Thank you for your help out there. If it weren't for you, well, let's not think about that." Anakin barely had the words to respond. He was delighted to see her alive, and he hated the fact that someone had attacked her. "I will find the people that did this, Padme. I promise." She looked up and said, "Why are 2 Jedi here to begin with? Was there suspicion of an attack?" Obi-Wan spoke this time, saying, "Anakin and I left the Jedi Order many years ago now. We spend time here and help those in need across the galaxy when we can. And today, Senator, that includes you." "I see," Padme said. "Once again, thank you. But now I must get on with the business of why I am here." "Duchess Satine, will you show me to the next meeting?" Padme asked. Satine and Padme departed, as Anakin and Obi-Wan watched. "We must be cautious, Anakin. You were feeling the dark side while waiting for Padme. Once too far down that path, you lose everything." Anakin hesitated, looking at Obi-Wan. "I won't let anything happen to her, but I understand. I know my limits, Obi-Wan, and soon I'll be stronger than the dark side. It won't consume me. It won't be strong enough. Now, I'm going to the prison, and I'm going to find out who did this." Obi-Wan wasn't going to argue with Anakin right now. From what he knew, no one could be stronger than the Force itself, not even Anakin, but that was for another time. The two went together to the prison where the Mandalorian traitor was being held. He's given nothing to the Mandalorian interrogators, but Anakin and Obi-Wan had different methods. Together, a double mind trick would be nearly impossible to resist. Inside the cell, Anakin and Obi-Wan held their heads to the face of the traitor. "Who was that group that attacked the senator?" they asked in unison. The traitor looked to be in immense mental pain, but he couldn't hold out for long. "A small group called Death Watch," he replied. "Why did you attack the senator?" Anakin demanded. And the traitor replied, "We aim to start a conflict between the Republic and Mandalore. It will help jumpstart the separatist cause. Count Dooku is our leader." Anakin and Obi-Wan looked at each other. They let go of the traitor's mind for a moment and walked out. They discussed a plan to end this conflict before it ever truly began. Count Dooku was pulling strings. He was hoping to start a war between Mandalore and the Republic. From there, he would begin to fight with his own separatist army, causing galactic war for years to come. Anakin and Obi-Wan could stop it here and now. They came up with a plan to kill Dooku, and the traitor would be of excellent use. The two continued their mind trick, instructing the traitor to go back to his group and inform Dooku that the senator was killed and 2 Jedi were captured. Once Dooku arrives to find the captured Jedi, he will die, and with him, any danger to Padme will fade. Anakin and Obi-Wan boarded the ship with the traitor. They held firm control of his mind, having him relay to the small Death Watch group that he had 2 Jedi prisoners, along with the body of Senator Amidala. They began to land, and the plan would be set in motion. Before Dooku landed, Death Watch had to be destroyed. And before landing, the 2 Jedi took over the controls of the ship. In no time, looking down at the camp, the blasters from the ship began firing into the small Death Watch camps. At this point, the Death Watch was a rather small group, and they were terrorists that needed to be eradicated. Their plans were war for Mandalore, to bring back the war of the planet. Obi-Wan and Anakin kept firing in their ship, destroying Death Watch members all around. Eventually, the engines were blown up by rockets, and the ship began going down. Anakin aimed it for the largest set of camps, and the 2 warriors leapt out of the ship, ignited their sabers, and landed on the ground at the same time that the ship crashed down in the camps. Lightsabers ignited, surrounded by the Force, the Jedi sprang into action. Around 20 members of Death Watch remained. All others had died in the blaster fire or simply ran off. 20 Mandalorian Death Watch versus 2 Force wielders, strong in the Force. Blaster fire, flamethrowers, rockets, cables, everything was thrown at the Jedi, and none of it could work. Kenobi, Skywalker, they deflected every blaster bolt, forced rockets back, and fire back at the Mandalorians, taking them down one by one. Anakin, giving into the darkness again, he felt the power, and he knew he could control it. He felt lightning explode out of his fingertips and into 3 Mandalorians. He held it until they died. He grabbed 2 more, choking the life out of them. He killed his half of the Mandalorians and looked to Obi-Wan, surrounded by 5 of them. Obi-Wan felt the darkness, but up to this point was refusing to give in. He was afraid of it, but he was surrounded by the final 5 members of Death Watch. A cable twisted around his leg. A blaster bolt grazed his arm. A flamethrower was about to hit him. Fine, Obi-Wan thought, for Satine. And as he was about to give in to the dark side, a giant wave of the Force sent all 5 Death Watch members flying, dying quickly. Obi-Wan looked up to see Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, engulfed in the Force, using the dark side but still in control. They exchanged nods and felt a new darkness now. Dooku was here. The ship landed, and 2 beings emerged, but neither of them were Dooku. One was a giant cyborg, tall, menacing, evil. The other was a slim, bald woman, strong in the dark side of the Force. Meanwhile, on Mandalore, Count Dooku landed. He was no fool. He had eyes everywhere, and he'd discovered his plan on Mandalore had been foiled by 2 Jedi. But from his intel, they weren't Jedi. Not really. They were capable of much more, free of the shackles of the Jedi Order, much like Dooku. So Dooku would either have to have them killed by his assassins, or the former Jedi would kill his assassins and come find him. They wouldn't really have a choice to whether or not to find him after all, considering Dooku was on Mandalore to capture Duchess Satine and Senator Amidala while the Jedi were distracted. Anakin and Obi-Wan ignited their sabers, and then the cyborg ignited 4, while the assassin ignited 2. Still not a fair fight, Anakin said as he and Obi-Wan approached them. The battle commenced, explosive energy all around, Anakin propelling himself forward, employing his acrobatic skills to close the distance with General Grievous. The Jedi Knight's lightsaber twirled and spun, defending against the General's relentless strikes. Anakin's speed, his agility, it kept Grievous on the defensive even with his 4 sabers. The cyborg was really no match for Anakin. On the other side, Obi-Wan engaged Ventress in his display of masterful swordsmanship as well. His precise movements against her aggressive attacks were too much for her as well. Obi-Wan's lightsaber moved with measured elegance, and he struck at opportune moments. Ventress really didn't know what was coming at her. And as the fight intensified, Anakin and Obi-Wan found themselves working in perfect harmony against their enemies. Their years of training together, just the two of them, allowed them to anticipate each other's moves effortlessly. Their combined strength, agility, their skill, it became a rather unstoppable force, driving Ventress back further and further. Anakin drew upon his great connection to the Force, unleashing powerful bursts of dark side, light side energy, all sorts of Force energy. Ventress had no idea what was being thrown at her. He then sent objects of the ship hurling towards Grievous, breaking it apart, throwing it at them, momentarily disrupting the General's mechanic moves. Seizing this opportunity now, Obi-Wan delivered a devastating blow, severing 2 of Grievous's robotic arms. He stumbled backwards, momentarily weakened, off balance, and now Ventress, her overconfidence was her weakness this whole time. Obi-Wan was able to also disarm her, and with Grievous and Ventress both disarmed, both on the ground, both suffering the fate of these former Jedi, they didn't know what to do from here. They were at the mercy of Anakin and Obi-Wan. "Where is Dooku?" Anakin said, darkness radiating from him. "Why, my friend, he's off to meet with 2 of the most important women on Mandalore," Ventress said. Rage burned inside of Anakin. He pushed both beings into their ship, then lifted the ship, crushing them beneath it. Obi-Wan, now embracing the darkness as well. He could not stand the fact that Satine was being captured by Dooku, Padme with her. They'd fallen into a trap. Dooku had them. They would have to find him now. The 2 of them sprinted to their ship, leaving behind nothing but destruction. Nothing would stand in their way, as they went off to rescue Padme and Satine. That's the end for part 1. Part 2 tomorrow. Let me know what you thought. I had a lot of fun writing it. I'm going to have a lot of fun writing part 2. A lot of characters that could get involved. Let me know what you'd want to see in it. So, thanks everybody. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video. Anakin and Obi-Wan reached their ship, but it was completely destroyed. Their engines had been destroyed in the battle. The duo would need to find a ship somewhere in the Death Watch camp, but they destroyed most of those as well. Anakin and Obi-Wan separated, looking for any working ship. Time was not on their side. Padme and Satine were in the hands of Dooku. And as Obi-Wan scavenged his area, he walked past the bodies of dead Death Watch members. Or at least he thought they were all dead. As Obi-Wan walked past them, he felt something. And then he heard it. The igniting of some sort of saber. "Murderer!" a voice called out. Obi-Wan turned to find a Mandalorian, holding what he knew to be the darksaber. This was Pre Vizsla, leader of the Death Watch. His armor was broken. He was burned from the lightning from Anakin's hands. But yet, here he stood, ready for a fight. Obi-Wan understood the darksaber from his time on Mandalore. He'd taken the time to learn about it, and now was actually seeing it for the first time. Whoever had the saber could lay claim to ruling Mandalore, but it had to be won in single combat. So here they were, right here, right now. Then, when everything is over, he and Satine could rule together. He could be with her forever if he just won the saber right here. They could make Mandalore the way they want it to be. Obi-Wan ignited his saber, his ambition burning through him. He deserved that saber. He would get it. He got into his stance, and he waited. Vizsla was like a child to Kenobi. If he wanted, he could choke him here and now. But where's the fun? Where's the honor in that? The Mandalorian traitor was tired, injured, burned. This would be easy. Vizsla charged Kenobi, And he humored him. He blocked all the strikes from Vizsla with just one hand, then waited for the right swing and grabbed Vizsla's hand with the saber, broke it, and stabbed him with his own darksaber. Kenobi watched the light fade from his eyes and clipped the saber to his belt. He was powerful enough to rule Mandalore. The dark side, though, coursing through him. And Kenobi silenced the thoughts inside of him. He is good. Why is he so conflicted? Powerful the dark side is, Kenobi remembered Yoda warning him all those years ago. Back then, he'd vowed to keep Anakin away from the darkness, vowed to never let the darkness take Anakin, vowed to do whatever he could to stop the darkness. But now he was also the one embracing it. And before he could continue his thoughts, Anakin flew over him with a ship that he'd found. Obi-Wan leapt aboard. They had to find Dooku. Fast. Satine and Padme were inside a building hidden away inside of the Works on Coruscant. They were in a small cell together, handcuffed and trapped. Dooku was around, and Padme asked him, "Why are we here? The Republic will be looking for us." Dooku replied, "Don't count on it. The Republic takes far too long to do anything of real meaning. No. The reason you are here is simply to lure the two warriors that protect your Mandalore, Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, two former Jedi like myself. My master is intrigued by them, and once they arrive, we will either kill them or they will join us." As Anakin and Obi-Wan entered space, a beep started to go off on Obi-Wan's wrist. "Satine and I carry a newly developed tracking signal for times like this. Looks like we have a signal," Obi-Wan said, and the duo took off to Coruscant. Him and Satine had developed tracking beacons to find each other in times exactly like this, and Satine was able to use it. Dooku, of course, knew this, but he had to lure them to the Works, lure them to his master, so they could all be alone. Along the way, the two talked about the Force, talked about their dark path. "Obi-Wan, the dark side. I can't stop myself from using it," Anakin said. "It makes me powerful, unstoppable, fearless, and I know you feel it too." Obi-Wan looked into the blue blur of hyperspace for a moment before replying, "I do feel it. It's not the first time either. Long ago, helping Satine when Master Qui-Gon was around, I knew that I loved her. She got into danger, and I did what needed to be done to save her. And then, when Qui-Gon died, I unleashed on that Sith Maul, but only for a moment. I only do it out of love. Love for Satine, for Qui-Gon, for you, Anakin." Anakin agreed, but silently they both wondered how long they could hold the dark side back from consuming them. Anakin spoke once more, saying, "Obi-Wan, promise me. If I ever go too far gone, if I ever fill with the dark side, fill with rage for anything other than love, revenge, hatred, save me from myself. I fear I will be truly unstoppable. If it happens, Obi-Wan, you must destroy me." Obi-Wan replied, saying, "It will never come to that. But I promise, Anakin, I will do what I must." Anakin and Obi-Wan followed the tracker to Coruscant, somewhere they hadn't been since they left the Order all those years ago. They didn't want to go back, but Satine and Padme were here, so they followed the tracker into the Works. Yoda and Mace Windu sat in the Jedi Council room alone. "I sense a disturbance in the Force," Windu said.
Yes, powerful it is. Our old friends, Kenobi and Skywalker, I sense. Their destiny, unfolding today, it is."
The Jedi inside the temple were staying out of these affairs. They were peacekeepers, not soldiers at this point. If war came out of this conflict, then the Republic would join. But Yoda was trusting the Force. Trusting the Force knew what it was doing, leading everyone, leading this power onto Coruscant. Anakin, the chosen one, here to destroy them. Yoda had to trust, at least for now, in the Force. Finally, Anakin landed the ship inside the open hangar where the tracking beacon was leading them. The two former Jedi emerged from the ship. They could feel the presences of the women that they loved, along with something much more sinister. "Your weapons, please. We don't want to make a mess of things," Dooku said from a hidden corner before making himself seen. And in front of him, Padme and Satine handcuffed. Dooku was holding his red saber to their throats. Anakin and Obi-Wan glared at him, and instead of putting his saber away, Anakin ignited it, and Dooku blasted lightning directly at Padme and Satine, knocking them to the ground. I won't be asking again. Weapons down or they die. Obi-Wan spoke to Anakin. Trust me right now, Anakin. Put down your saber. This will work in our favor. Anakin nodded and put the saber down. Dooku used the Force to bring them both to his side. Now, gentlemen, I have a proposition for you. I am going to start a war within the Republic. I'm gathering systems to form a separatist alliance, and an army is being built as we speak. I should be able to win a war versus the Republic, but Mandalore on my side would secure my victory. Mandalore has been a thorn in my side as I try to do this, with 2 warriors stopping some of my paths. You are those 2 warriors. Dooku went on about how Mandalore, led by 2 former Jedi, would be the perfect planet to be the face of the Separatist alliance. How a Mandalorian army, combined with the Separatists, could take down the Republic from the inside very quickly, and how Anakin and Obi-Wan could be the perfect leaders underneath a new emperor. And who will be this emperor? Obi-Wan asked. In reality, Anakin and Obi-Wan didn't truly care for this. They were here to kill Dooku, save the women that they love. Their life away from the Republic, away from the Jedi, away from it all was much easier, much better. And taking down the Republic would mean killing the Jedi that Obi-Wan knows. He doesn't resent them in any way. He just went on his own path. He chose Anakin. And so, Obi-Wan engaged Dooku in conversation. He'd always been a good negotiator. But what Dooku didn't know was Anakin and Obi-Wan had developed a series of signals for times like this. When audible communication just wasn't available, they relied on easy tricks like this. And Obi-Wan had one secret weapon Dooku was unaware about. But after Dooku went on about a new empire, another man stepped from the shadows. He pulled down his hood and revealed the face of Chancellor Palpatine. My friends, you have been presented with the most important decision of your lives. Join our cause or die. After watching the women you love die. Palpatine lifted Padme and Satine into the air, choking them. It was time to act. Obi-Wan and Anakin realized what was going on. The corruption was the Republic. The leader of the Republic was the main source of the corruption. Sure, he could take it all down and rebuild, but the Republic could never be strong with a leader like this in their way. He was the one bringing it all down from the inside. He was the poison. It was all Palpatine. Dooku was the blind one. Suddenly, they acted. Anakin pulled both sabers from Dooku's cloak. In one realization, Dooku shot fatal lightning at Anakin, who was able to catch it. But what they didn't know was Obi-Wan didn't give up a saber. He still had the darksaber. As this all happened, Obi-Wan leapt into the air, igniting the hidden darksaber, and swung at Palpatine. Palpatine was able to block the strike, but had to drop Padme and Satine to the ground to do so. As Obi-Wan engaged Palpatine, Anakin threw the lightning back at Dooku, hitting him in the chest. Anakin looked to Obi-Wan clearly in a losing battle, but he had to engage Dooku in lightsaber combat. This was not a fight they would win easily. Anakin embraced the dark side, embraced the power, embraced the feeling he did whatever he could to win this fight quickly. And this was exactly what Palpatine wanted. He felt Anakin's power the day he arrived at the Jedi Temple, and it was not much of a surprise when he left. In fact, it may have been better to let him feel his power. He let Obi-Wan do the work of training him, knowing the dark side would find its way, knowing young Skywalker would eventually find his way to him. Now, all he had to do was truly let the dark side unleash inside of Skywalker, and killing his friends would do the trick. And once embraced in the dark side, Palpatine could subdue him, promise him all the power in the world, promise him all the power he could ever want. After all, Anakin was just still a young boy. What could he really do, even with the full power of the dark side on his side? So, Palpatine pushed Obi-Wan to the ground, looked over to Anakin and Dooku, and he smiled. Dooku had fallen to a knee. Skywalker was swinging with extreme power, extreme rage, all of his anger to kill Dooku. And he had Dooku. He was down, barely holding up his saber as Anakin swung harder and harder until Dooku was disarmed. With rage in his eyes, a yellowish tint starting to show, Anakin killed Dooku as a cackle filled the room. Obi-Wan looked to Anakin, then to Palpatine, laughing like he just won a war. "You will become a powerful Sith, young Skywalker," Palpatine said as he pulled Padme to him with the Force. In one split second, Padme flew to Palpatine. Anakin and Obi-Wan leapt over to both of them. But it was too late. Palpatine stabbed Padme through the back, tossing her aside. Anakin landed, fell to his knees beside her. Obi-Wan let his own rage in. He went back to fighting Palpatine, and was again thrown aside after a few strikes. Obi-Wan was not letting the darkness consume him. He couldn't. He wouldn't. And it was causing him this battle. Anakin looked to Padme, now dead in his arms. He was about to explode. He floated her body far away, setting his saber to the ground. Everything was imploding around him. He began to feel his lightsaber crystal inside, and he poured his rage into it. He'd failed to protect Padme. He had all this power and he couldn't protect her. He would never fail again. He would kill anyone who dared stand against him. He felt his power. He let everything bleed. He let all of it. He felt it pour into the Force, pour into his lightsaber. And finally, he felt peace. An explosion of red lightning filled the room, sending everyone flying backwards. Anakin stood up, eyes as red as the saber he now held in his hands. He looked up at Palpatine. His smile began to fade into fear. He'd done it. He'd turned Anakin completely. But he'd underestimated how powerful Anakin had truly become in all this time. Anakin had already been embracing the dark side, and now going all in on it made him unstoppable. Anakin charged, one hand pouring lightning, the other swinging a lightsaber at Palpatine. The two dueled, Anakin using one hand and never stopping the lightning with the other. Sabers clashed, sparks flew, Palpatine using two sabers, one to fight, the other to block the lightning. Anakin had the advantage. He backed Palpatine up to the wall, and he blasted the wall with lightning, sent pieces of it crashing into Palpatine, pulling pieces of it into his back, knocking him to the ground. Palpatine tried desperately to get up, unaware of just how powerful Anakin was. Anakin broke his legs, stared down at him as he stabbed Palpatine through the chest. He was hot with rage. It was all he knew now. He was gone. It blinded him. There was no going back. Palpatine unleashed him. But then, everything went cold. He looked down, a black blade through his own chest, and his mind flashed back to his conversation with Obi-Wan on the ship before landing. Back to when he told Obi-Wan to destroy him, should he ever go down this path. Obi-Wan kept his promise. Anakin fell to the ground, looked to Obi-Wan, the rage inside of him dying as he died with it. Obi-Wan, his eyes were full of tears, Satine running over to both of them. Anakin had destroyed the Sith, but it had cost him everything. Obi-Wan did not want to do this, but he knew that Anakin would not have stopped here. He knew the full power of the dark side. He felt it inside of himself, felt what he would become had he embraced what Anakin had just embraced. The full power of the dark side would have been chaos for the galaxy. So, Obi-Wan took the one chance he had. He did Anakin a favor, and Anakin died. Obi-Wan and Satine would take off with the bodies of Padme and Anakin. The planet would celebrate the safe return of Duchess Satine. The Republic would rebuild with a new chancellor. Things were in chaos across the galaxy, but they were better for it. Obi-Wan was now leading with Satine, and the holder of the darksaber. He was the rightful ruler, alongside Duchess Satine. but he was broken from killing Anakin. Eventually, he would go in to join the celebration. As he did, he leaned up against a pole and looked at the horizon. As he did, he saw the ghost of his former master, Qui-Gon Jinn, and with him, the ghost of Anakin Skywalker. They were together after life. Obi-Wan couldn't believe it. He would talk with them after this. They would visit him when the Force allowed. And Obi-Wan would go on to live a happy life on Mandalore with Satine. They would have a child who would grow up in the Force. They would live a happy life with Anakin and Qui-Gon leading him in the Force. That's where we're going to end this one. That's this two-parter. Hope you enjoyed. We didn't get into the clones just because that was, the plan after the plan. So that's what happens eventually. Or, it never had to happen because the war never happened. As for other things, Maul hadn't been found yet. That could be a storyline if I ever do a part 3 to this. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. I wanted to go down a path where really no one, two of the people died. Anakin and Padme. I wanted to have Anakin go full power. It's always fun to make Anakin just go crazy, so hope you enjoyed that part of it. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed as much as I enjoyed writing, and I'll see you in the next video.